HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Mysterious Bookshop presents The Best Mystery Stories of the Year, 2024. Edited by Anthony Horowitz and Otto Penzler. Introduction by Anthony Horowitz. Foreword by Otto Penzler. Read by B.J. Harrison and Kim Niemi. Foreword. A commonly asked question, probably the most commonly asked, posed to authors, is where do you get your ideas? One of the most asked questions of me is its cousin. Where do you find the stories for the book? And its corollary, asked by beginning mystery writers, where can I submit my stories? I cannot answer the first question, which to me is one step away from being a miracle, and it's too glib to respond to the others with any place that publishes fiction, though it is largely true. If a writer is just discovering mystery fiction, the most obvious answer is Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, which has been publishing first-rate detective stories for more than 80 years. If they have been working in this literary genre for even a short time, it is too obvious to mention, which is also true of its sister publication, Alfred Hitchcock's Mystery Magazine. If we add the third most likely choice, the Strand Magazine, the home of most Sherlock Holmes stories during the Victorian and Edwardian eras, and brought back to life 25 years ago after a long hiatus, I have exhausted all the most prominent candidates. Sadly, fewer and fewer short fiction works appear in general magazines. Such women's magazines as Red Book, which first serialized Dashiell Hammett's The Thin Man, among much else. Good Housekeeping and Ladies' Home Journal proudly ran stories, many of them mysteries, as did such men's magazines as Esquire, Argosy, Stag, Gentleman's Quarterly, and Playboy, and some men actually did read the fiction, contrary to common belief. Now, if they still exist, the publication of fiction is as rare as a conservative defense lawyer. There were other mystery specialty magazines in the 1950s, 1960s, and a few held on into the 1970s. Manhunt, in which original stories by Ross MacDonald, Mickey Spillane, and Ed McBain first appeared. The Saint Mystery Magazine, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and eponymous digest-sized publications named for Rex Stout, Ed McBain, Michael Shane, Edgar Wallace, and John Creasy, the latter two published in England. Some years earlier, there were such high-paying and prestigious general interest magazines as the Saturday Evening Post, Collier's, Liberty, Scribner's, and Cosmopolitan, before it changed its target readership to primarily women. There were, too, pulp magazines, which flourished in the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s, before the creation of mass-market paperback books doomed them. Pulps, which in some years saw as many as 500 different titles at newsstands, contained mostly fiction and featured authors who went on to become successful book writers. In the mystery field, the most notable were Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler, and Earl Stanley Gardner, though some British authors also frequently introduced works in these cheap magazines with their garish covers, notably Agatha Christie. The New Yorker still publishes quality fiction, including the occasional mystery story, and several others still throw a bone to authors by offering a single story per month. There are numerous other outlets, but not for authors who want to earn a living by the pen. There are hundreds of literary journals that publish thousands of stories every year, but they only provide nourishment for the soul, unable to pay more than a few dollars and copies of the magazine for a work over which a serious writer may have labored for a month or more. And this is princely compared to electronic magazines, e-zines, where payment is largely restricted to a sincere thank you. More recently, a good source of original mystery and crime stories has been anthologies. Whereas anthologies were once relatively uncommon, scores now seem to be published each year, focused on a region or an organization that publishes them, restricting contributions to members of their particular coterie. Some of these modest publications have been especially well represented in this volume. A high percentage of stories in this edition were discovered in literary journals, most of whom deny that they publish crime fiction until I'm able to supply the parameters of how to define mystery. While it is redundant to write it again, since I have already done it in so many best-of anthologies that I've edited, although it is painful to acknowledge, I do recognize that not everyone reads and memorizes my forewords. It is fair warning to state that many people erroneously regard a mystery as a detective story. Though important, detective stories are only a subgenre of the much bigger literary category of mystery fiction, generally referred to in the UK as crime fiction, which I define as any work of fiction in which a crime or the threat of a crime is central to the theme or the plot. While I love good puzzles and tales of pure ratiocination, few of these are written today, as the mystery genre has evolved, or devolved, depending upon your point of view, into a more character-driven form of literature, with more emphasis on the why of a crime's commission than the who or how. The line between mystery fiction and general fiction has become more and more blurred in recent years, producing fewer memorable detective stories, but more significant literature. To find the best of these stories is a year-long quest, largely enabled by my invaluable colleague Michelle Slung, who culls the mystery magazines, both printed and electronic, for suitable stories, just as she does short story collections, works by a single author, and anthologies, works by a variety of authors, popular magazines, and literary journals. As the fastest and smartest reader in the world, she examines somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 stories a year, largely to determine if they are mysteries — you can't tell a story by its title — and then to determine if they are worth serious consideration. I then read the harvested crop, passing along some of the best, or at least those I liked best, to the guest editor, and we select the 20 that are then reprinted, with another 10 that just missed the cut being listed in an honor roll as additional outstanding stories. It is almost impossible to adequately thank the guest editor for the 2024 edition of the Mysterious Bookshop Presents The Year's Best Mystery Stories, Anthony Horowitz, one of the most talented and hard-working writers I've ever known. He has been remarkably successful in so many areas of crime fiction that it would be difficult to point to a single one as primary. As a television writer, which is where I became a fan, he created and wrote Foyle's War, arguably the most compelling TV series in history. He also created and wrote the vastly popular Midsummer Murders, as well as such limited-run shows as Collision and Injustice. His young adult novels, featuring Alex Rider, have sold more than 20 million copies and have been the basis for a much-loved TV series. His adult books have shown his range: 2 Sherlock Holmes novels, The House of Silk and Moriarty, 3 James Bond novels, Trigger Mortis, Forever and a Day, and With a Mind to Kill. The massive bestsellers Magpie Murders and Moonflower Murders, both also successful television programs, and perhaps the most fascinating and challenging of all, the most recent series featuring Detective Hawthorne and a sidekick named Anthony Horowitz. The word is murder, the sentence is death, a line to kill, the twist of a knife, and close to death. There is much, much more, but the big question is, after more than 50 novels and all those television shows, how he found time and energy to work on this volume. A word of thanks is also more than appropriate for the previous guest editors of this series, Lee Child, Sarah Paretsky, and Amor Towles. I am deeply in debt to all 4 for their generous participation. While I engage in a relentless quest to locate and read every crime/mystery/suspense story published, I live in terror that I will miss a worthy story. So if you are an author, editor, or publisher, or care about one, please feel free to send a book, magazine, or tear sheet to me, care of The Mysterious Bookshop, 58 Warren Street, New York, New York, 10007. If it first appeared electronically, you must submit a hard copy. It is vital to include the author's contact information. No unpublished material will be considered, for what should be obvious reasons. No material will be returned. If you distrust the Postal Service, enclose a self-addressed stamped postcard, and I'll let you know that your submission was received. To be eligible for next year's edition, a story must have been published in the calendar year 2024. The earlier in the year I receive the story, the more fondly I regard it. For reasons known only to them, some dunderheads wait until Christmas week to submit a story published the previous spring. This occurs every year, causing serious irritability as I read a stack of stories while friends trim Christmas trees, do their holiday shopping, meet for lunches and dinners, or otherwise celebrate the holiday season. It had better be a damned good story if you do this. I am being neither arrogant nor whimsical when I state that the absolute firm deadline for me to receive a submission is December 31st, due to the very tight production schedule for the book. If the story arrives one day later, it will not be read. Sorry. Otto Penzler, February 2024. Introduction. Crime Fiction and the Truth. I knew I wanted to be a writer when I was 10 years old. Telling stories came natural to me. A lonely, not terribly clever boy in a destructive private school, I slept in a dormitory with 6 or 7 boys on army beds, all of us missing our parents and home life. I told stories and cheered the others up. That was how I made friends and discovered my calling. By 16, I knew that I would be not just a writer, but a crime writer. That insight came from a Christmas present I received from my father, the complete short stories and novels of Sherlock Holmes in 2 volumes. I have them to this day. What I loved about Arthur Conan Doyle's brilliant creation was not the crimes themselves. In fact, there are surprisingly few murders among the 60 investigations, and many of the stories are fantastical to say the least. No. What grabbed me was the idea that mystery and crime had tentacles that could reach out across the entire world. That a story beginning with a treasure stolen in Agra or a forced marriage in Utah could find its conclusion in Croydon or the Brixton Road. If you know London, you'll know that these are not the most exciting holiday destinations, and as a teenager being brought up in Stanmore, which I thought of as an equally uninteresting place, the attraction was irresistible. And so, Foyle's War, Midsummer Murders, Magpie Murders, the Hawthorne novels, my biog says that I have committed more fictional murders than any living writer, which may only be the dream of an over-imaginative publisher's PR department, but does broadly describe my work of the last 30 years. I love crime fiction. I love reading it and writing it. I devoured pretty much all the works of Agatha Christie when I was traveling the world in a year off before I went to college. I'd pick up and drop off paperbacks as I progressed through youth hostels and actually read Death on the Nile, Murder in Mesopotamia, and Murder on the Orient Express in Istanbul. I couldn't afford the train tickets. At college, I devoured Golden Age crime fiction and adored Anthony Berkeley, Dorothy Sayers, Rex Stout, Ellery Queen, all the usual suspects, and more. I'm a fan of at least a dozen modern crime writers I could name. Japanese crime fiction in particular appeals to me, and I love almost anything published by Pushkin Vertigo, and of course, the Mysterious Press. But as I've gotten older, I've become troubled. Why do I love crime fiction? Why does anyone? I remember working on Agatha Christie's Poirot, writing scripts for Sir David Suchet, who, for me, has never been bettered in the title role. I would often find myself wrangling with the producer until 3 o'clock in the morning. How did the fingerprint get on the glass? Could the killer arrive at the house in such a short time? What were the sightlines? Were we making everything clear enough? As the clock ticked on and bed became an ever more unlikely prospect, a devilish voice would whisper in my ear, "Who cares? Does it really matter? It's only a murder mystery. Who will notice?" I had the same dark thought when I was writing Midsummer Murders. Each script took me about 3 months to create. It demanded 2 hours of a viewer's attention on a Sunday evening. And all of this simply to discover that the butler did it? What was I doing with my life? And yet for all my growing doubts, crime fiction has become more popular than ever. You must forgive me if I explore this with reference to my own country, England, but let's start with the pandemic, when, not surprisingly, book buying soared. According to the press at the time, book sales rose by an astonishing 21%, with sales of around 3.8 million copies a week. And what was the most successful genre? It wasn't humor or romance or even science fiction, which might have held up a mirror to what we were living through. It was crime. While people huddled behind closed doors, a staggering 60,000 murders were delivered in a single week. What is it about murder stories that makes them so popular? The first thing to say, and I've said it often enough, is that it's not the murders themselves. Contrary to what many people seem to think, particularly with the high mortality rate in Midsummer Murders, I don't enjoy killing people. And as a corollary, it always strikes me how gentle and collegial most of the crime writers I've met have been. The point of murder is simply to introduce character. There is no faster way to open the door into people's lives. A wife kills her husband, but they seemed so happy together. What was the truth of their relationship? What was going on behind those net curtains? Nor is the detective necessarily the main reason why we pick up a mystery. Of course, Rebus, Morse, Reacher, Harry Hole, the Lincoln Lawyer, and all the rest of them have their loyal fan bases, but that doesn't account for the thousands of other successful and even best-selling books with less well-known investigators or single adventures that have never continued into the world of the series. Agatha Christie's most brilliant and most copied novel, And Then There Were None, doesn't have a detective at all. It's my belief that crime novels have come to offer something that is sorely missing in real life, and that as human beings we fundamentally need. And that something is justice, closure, truth. Consider the template of 1,000 whodunits. A community is in trouble, rife with suspicion and fear. It's no coincidence that so many Golden Age crime stories are set in English villages, where everyone knows everyone, or thinks they do. Somebody has been killed. The detective usually arrives as an outsider, unless of course the village happens to be St. Mary Mead. He or she is rather like the Byronic hero, that man of loneliness and mystery, and finds a modern counterpart in one of those Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns, where the lone rider suddenly turns up in town, settles every score, and then disappears like a desert mirage. One thing is certain. By the time the hero leaves, the truth will be known with every I dotted and T crossed. The community will be healed. When you start reading a murder mystery, there can be no doubt that there will be a satisfying conclusion. I'm sure somebody at some time will have written a whodunit without an ending. Josephine Tey springs to mind with The Daughter of Time. But a book without that last chapter, all the suspects gathered in the library or wherever, and the killer unmasked, would be an act of self-harm, a literary chocolate teapot. And whether you've guessed it or not, that last reveal is what makes it all worthwhile. Sadly, life in the UK is not like that at all. You may have heard of the sub-postmasters, more than 900 men and women who ran small post offices all over the country and who were wrongly accused of theft when a faulty computer system called Horizon was installed in their businesses. Ironically, it was a brilliant TV drama Mr. Bates versus the Post Office that brought to light what is now being called the greatest miscarriage of justice in UK history. Some sort of compensation may be on the way as politicians, journalists, PO executives, and Fujitsu bosses, who created the technology and lied about its reliability, rush to apologize, effectively covering their asses. But 59 innocent people died with the shame of a criminal record. 4 of them tragically committed suicide. And though lawyers made millions from the ensuing court cases, lives have been ruined, and the process of justice has been grindingly slow. And then there is a woman called Michelle Mone, who, if the allegations against her are true, could have stepped straight out of the pages of a Chandler novel as a blonde glamour queen with a shifty-looking husband, both of them accused of profiteering from COVID-19. These 2 charmers were given a £120 million contract to supply personal protective equipment to our health service, none of which turned out to be fit for purpose, but which earned them profits of £65 million. The National Crime Agency is circling, but Mone is still a baroness, elevated to the House of Lords. Her husband, Doug, has just taken possession of a £50 million yacht. It is hard to describe the sense of anger and disgust these 2 inspire. At least 223,396 people died of COVID in the UK. I could go on. Brexit, our departure from Europe, is widely seen as a social and financial disaster. Yet the politicians who sold it to us have never been held to account and continue to earn huge chunks of money on the speaker circuit around the world. Liz Truss, who was Prime Minister for just 45 disastrous days and who cost the country an estimated £30 billion, has cheerfully accepted a yearly allowance of £115,000 for life. Injustice upon injustice. And as for the sense of truth, even that is being held back from us. Social media provides multiple interpretations of the same events. As in the United States, conspiracy theories abound, and we now live in an age of post-truth, where what you believe cannot be contradicted because, quite simply, it is your belief. I've mentioned COVID a couple of times in this introduction. Is it not incredible that we still haven't been told the cause of an event that derailed the entire world? Was it a dead pangolin sold in a wet market in Wuhan? An accident in a nearby laboratory? An experiment that went wrong? We don't know. And wherever we look these days, we live in a state of constant uncertainty. And I don't think it's good for us. So it's hardly surprising that crime fiction, with its insistence upon one inarguable ending and a landscape in which the guilty are punished and the innocent freed to continue with their lives, should be so valued now. Just look at the stories in this collection. Little nuggets of life that just make you smile and make some sort of sense of the chaos all around. I was quite wrong to think the genre lightweight or irrelevant. What it offers is kindness, decency, justice, and truth in a world that increasingly seems to have none, and at a time when it has never mattered more. Anthony Horowitz, January 2024. Ace Atkins is an award-winning New York Times best-selling author who started his writing career as a crime beat reporter in Florida. Don't Let the Devil Ride is his 30th novel. His previous novels include 11 books in the Quinn Colson series and multiple true crime novels based on infamous crooks and killers. In 2010, he was chosen by Robert B. Parker's family to continue the iconic Spencer series, adding 10 novels to the franchise. He lives in Oxford, Mississippi with his family. Stunts. Ace Atkins. Red River Street. Like the old song says, there's nothing like the life of a Hollywood stuntman. Saturday afternoon, 3 people were shot and another killed outside a downtown Austin bar. According to police, the altercation started inside the Royal Lounge, 701 Red River Street, at what was supposed to be a fan appreciation fundraiser for a regular in the local movie scene, retired stuntman Jason Colson. Colson, 71, is in stable condition at UT Health Austin. Police haven't identified the other two victims or the man who died at the scene.
"I was in line for an autograph when we heard the gunshots outside,"
said Scott Montgomery, 51, of Austin.
"At first, everyone thought it was part of some kind of Old West show, like maybe Mr. Colson was going to fall backward off the roof or something. But when we walked outside to watch, the police rushed up and pushed us back. That's when we heard someone was dead."
According to IMDb.com, Jason Colson worked from the early 70s up through the early 2000s on films like Smokey and the Bandit, Hooper, and the Cannonball Run films. He was the go-to double and stuntman for the late Burt Reynolds. In recent years, Colson has been a featured guest at several film festivals and events for the Alamo Drafthouse.
"I don't know who would make trouble for Jason,"
said Lars Nilsson, programmer for the Austin Film Society.
"He's one of the nicest guys in the business, always willing to give his time and immense knowledge of the stunt scene in Southern California to fans. Anyone who has ever heard his story about jumping that cherry-red Trans Am over a ravine in Alabama for Hooper knows that he was the real deal."
A woman who answered the phone at Colson's home said she didn't want to comment on the shooting. Austin police say no charges have been filed in an active investigation. Any witnesses are asked to call the department at 512-472-TIPS.
"How do I look?"
Jason Colson asked. It was a little after 10 Saturday morning, and his daughter Caddy was in his apartment kitchen, sitting at his old wagon wheel table. She had a purse thrown over her shoulder and keys in her hand, ready to roll, even though the show didn't start till high noon.
"Would you be mad if I said the shirt was a bit much?"
Caddy asked.
"This shirt?"
Jason said.
"Hell, Bert gave it to me himself. Had 6 of 'em made for Smoky Deuce. Fans will get it. It's real silk, and the red roses were embroidered by hand. Mexican woman over on Old Vera Street made a dozen of 'em special for the crew."
"I'm sure the ladies loved it back during the bicentennial," Caddy said. "But how about that nice one Donnie and I gave you for Christmas? Maybe tone it down a little bit, Dad."
"That's not what folks want," Jason said. "They're not paying $25 a head to see an old man in a button-down collar and tie. This isn't some fancy church service."
"That's me, putting on pearls and lipstick before worship."
Caddy worked her tail off for some Christian nonprofit feeding homeless folks and immigrants in need. She had on an old threadbare Johnny Cash t-shirt, bell-bottoms, and hippie sandals. She rolled her eyes as Jason walked over to the counter, where he reached for his wallet and then headed back to his bedroom. He stood in front of his floor-length mirror and checked out the spit-shined Lucchese's, the tight black jeans and black silk cowboy shirt. He ran a comb over his gray hair and gray mustache and decided that his daughter was a fine woman and an amazing person, but plain wrong on the shirt. 1976. Hell, everyone knew that Smokey 2 hit theaters in the summer of 1980.
"Ready, Daddy?"
Caddy said, calling out from the kitchen.
"I was born ready,"
Jason said in his best Roy Rogers. Jason remembered the Red River District before the place had a name. He used to hang out at the one nightclub back when it was filled with bikers, hippies, and old blues musicians. The bar had once turned away the boys from Pink Floyd because they couldn't name a Lightnin' Hopkins song. That wasn't long before they were shooting outlaw blues with Peter Fonda and Susan St. James. He doubled Fonda in that picture, riding a police motorcycle along the concrete path of Walter Creek and up and down North Lamar and Lavaca. Fonda was playing a convict who'd had a hit song stolen from him by a sleazy country and western singer. Pretty damn good script, written by his pal Bill Norton, who went on to write Convoy. Jason did stunts on both. The shoot wasn't easy. Most days, Fonda and a lot of the crew had shown up stoned out of their minds. Hard to believe he was gone.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?